This Week in Startups is brought to you by GoToMeeting. Meeting is believing. Visit GoToMeeting.com. Click the Try It Free button and sign up for a 30-day trial. And Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code TWiST at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace. Build it beautiful.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, it's another episode of Ask Jason, our first one to kick off 2016. I'm so excited. We were flooded with your questions, and this is one of my favorite things to do because, listen, I meet with startups for a living, and I invest in 50 a year, and I hear every possible question, and I talk to a lot of people smarter than me, frankly, about these questions, because the same questions keep coming up. And here's the thing, people will not give you a candid answer in this world. They're not going to tell it to you blunt and straight. That's why you tune in to this show, This Week in Startups, because you know that I will tell you the truth. And our first question is from Carlos, and Carlos, he definitely needs a dose of honesty here. I'm going to read you his question. Jason, I have a validated idea with huge potential and market, but I don't want to build a startup because I know there are successful startups in this niche that could easily add this idea to their products. How do I sell the idea to an established or successful startup? Carlos, I get this question often, and the answer is you don't. You are not some unique, brilliant person who comes up with the greatest ideas in the world. You are overvaluing your ideas. And it's common for people to do this. They think because they figured out some idea that Google or YouTube or Facebook or Snapchat or Uber should be doing, they're some kind of geniuses. Now listen, even in the 1% chance that you are the genius of all geniuses, the 0.1% chance that you're putting together these incredible ideas that nobody else can think of, well, if you're that person, you should be starting companies. If you're the person, like the other 99.99% of us, who has the same ideas as everybody else. Oh, Uber of this, Uber of that, Uber of chocolate chip cookies, Uber of pizza, Uber of dog washing, Uber of dry cleaning. Their ideas are so obvious. Put Uber before anything. Put Facebook before or after any word. Facebook for sports, Facebook for music, Facebook for this group of people, Facebook for that group of people. None of these ideas are all that unique. You're overvaluing ideas. There is no marketplace for selling ideas. Ideas are easy. Execution is hard. To the victor go the spoils. And the victor is the one who can, Carlos, execute. If you don't have the ability to execute, then your ideas are worthless. That's just the God's honest truth. There's no market for you to sell your ideas. Unless maybe you want to become a product manager, design these things, make wireframes, and go work at one of those companies, and then they'll pay you a salary in order, and maybe some stock options in order to flesh out and actually test these ideas. So, Ben, the answer is you will not successfully sell any of your ideas. There's one little tiny exception for this, which is you could become a patent troll. You could actually come up with a bunch of ideas, patent them, but there's a lot of patent reform going on. It's a whole separate issue, and you probably don't want that lifestyle anyway. And it's super expensive to do because it costs 15, 20 grand just to even file the provisional patent. Okay, great question, Carlos. I'm sorry the answer is not like there's some marketplace like eBay where you can just go sell your idea to the highest bidder. Okay. Next up, Ben says, if a startup has novelty and traction in a high-growth market with a solid team, but is struggling to get investors excited, do you see that as a problem with the pitch or the product? Okay, good questions. A lot going on here. So the startup has traction. You're saying it has traction. And it's a high growth market, but you're not saying the traction is high growth. So you're saying the market is great, but the startup, they have traction, but not high growth traction. And that you have a solid team. You didn't say like a world-class team. You didn't say you have a great team. But they're struggling to get investors excited. Well, what are the reasons that the investors might not be excited? Well, in truth, it could be your team. Your team might not be that inspiring. They might not think you're the team to take this idea all the way. It's possible. You have to then go prove them wrong, of course. Investors are not like perfect in their decision making. And maybe the market isn't as high growth as you think. That could be a red flag. You actually think the market is bigger than it is. And you mentioned the word novelty. The startup has novelty. Well, maybe people think that it's a little too novel, as in a fad, as in a gimmick. It's impossible for me to tell exactly without actually seeing the product, but it could be the pitch, the product, the team, or the market. The pitch, it's unlikely that it's the pitch. I mean, VCs can see through, typically investors can see through a bad pitch if there's something really great going on there. The product is cut and dry, as is the performance. So you're going to need to have definitive month-over-month growth, SaaS, if it's a software as a service, recurring revenue every month, or 100% or 50% definitive growth. It's up to us as entrepreneurs to prove that we have the traction needed in order to get the investors' money. In your case, I have a feeling that your growth is not as definitive as it needs to be. Focus on growth. If the numbers are there, the investors will take the meeting. And here's an idea for you. Ask the investors in a follow-up email, "Thank you for taking the time, Jason. It was a pleasure to meet with you. One thing we would be really appreciative is if you could tell us exactly why we were not a good investment for your firm. And if you could be as candid as possible, if it's us or the product, the market, or the traction, please tell us as candidly as you can why we weren't able to wow you, because we want to get as much value out of these meetings as possible." You'll be surprised. A lot of VCs will probably sugarcoat it. Some will not. And what you can do is if they sugarcoat it, you can write back and say, we would totally love to get the unsugarcoated version of this. And if you say that in person, can you be candid to me? Why can't I raise money, do you think? Let them be candid and just listen. It may take meeting 10 investors and maybe 2 of them will be candid, 8 of them will not. But it's our job as founders, as I said, to have definitive traction. That is your job. So if they're not giving you the money and you're not getting the growth, you can't force them to give you the money, but you can change the growth story. So focus on what's in your control, which is the growth around your startup. Good luck with it, Ben. Okay, let's take another question. This one is from Ellen. Loved your blog on distribution, which was the one I wrote that said, "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight." Blunt, current, down to earth, and great, since far too often it seems, from the outside, that this is not relevant to investors. What is second most important to you? Well, it's interesting. There are other investors out there who have a different worldview than I have. We all are sort of products of our own track record. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll look back on my track record and I'll say, hey, how did I wind up getting into the Uber investment or the Thumbtack investment or Wealthfront or Raise or Chartbeat or Signpost? I'll look at those successes and say, what was it about that, right? So we all build our own signaling. Now, for me, signaling about entrepreneurs is I look for people who are winners and who execute at a high level. But over time, I've started to think about that even a little bit more. Of course, you want somebody with drive, right? Of course, you want somebody who can execute. But one of the things I'm looking for is people who can listen and learn. People who have the skill of acquiring skills. At the end of the day, I think this might be the most important skill of all entrepreneurs, of all of entrepreneurship, which is if you can acquire new skills in a highly dynamic, changing environment, you're going to do great. If you can't, you're going to really suffer. There's so many skills out there you need to acquire, and you need to be acquiring them while, let's face it, you're trying to get your startup to profitability and growth. And if you don't acquire those skills in the middle of growing your startup, you're going to fail. So the ability to multitask and be able to add skills to your, repertoire, I think is a really important skill to have in 2016. Just think about all the time and effort and money you spend going to meetings, going across town, getting stuck in traffic from Palo Alto all the way up to San Francisco, out to Oakland, traveling across the country, going to Seattle, going down to LA, back to New York. It is exhausting, and it is a waste of time and money. Most meetings could occur with the help of GoToMeeting, and they would occur flawlessly. I know because I do these meetings all the time. In fact, I've been meeting with a dozen entrepreneurs every week over GoToMeeting, back to back to back, recording these meetings and sharing them back with the entrepreneurs as I give them feedback for when they come to the Launch Festival in March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, in fact. And I can only do with GoToMeeting because everybody can use any product they have, computer, tablet, smartphone, doesn't matter what operating system, it just works everywhere. And it is HD quality with perfect HD sound and the ability to share screens. And it never hiccups, it never has bandwidth problems, it just always works. And that to me is the key. If you're gonna do these kind of virtualized meetings, they can't be breaking up and they can't have poor fidelity. They have to be perfect. So here is your call to action. This is what I want you to do right now. I want you to go to GoToMeeting.com and try it free for 30 days. There is nothing to lose. Visit GoToMeeting.com and click the Try It Free button. Do it now and have your first meeting up and running in minutes. It literally works so simple that I have like little Google Calendar Chrome extension where it puts a GoToMeeting button every time I create a meeting, and I just press boop, GoToMeeting, and it generates a code, gives everybody the code, everybody knows the link, boom, and it just works. So go ahead and go to GoToMeeting.com and get your free 30-day trial. It's a great product. I've been using it for years. I love it. It's a pleasure for me to read, an ad about GoToMeeting because I don't have to read it because I use it. It's literally on the list of my top 10, 20 products that I use every week. It just makes me super efficient in meeting with entrepreneurs. So thanks to our friends at GoToMeeting. And if you're a super fan of the show, go ahead and thank at GoToMeeting on Twitter. They love to see your support of the program. Okay, let's get back to this episode. Okay, welcome back. Another question as part of our 2016 kickoff Ask Jason episode. This one is from Dan. How do you or other angel investors judge startups in fields where you have no expertise, i.e. traditional Chinese medicine, which I'm assuming is Dan's field? P.S. I might be wrong about the particular field, but you get the idea. Yeah, of course. Well, here's what happens. When there is a trend going on, I meet with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 companies in the space, and they all educate me. That's part of one of the great aspects of being an investor. It really is perhaps my favorite aspect, is that I get to sit with people who are much, much smarter than me and have them explain to me how solar energy works, how a B2B marketplace works, how customer acquisition works in this SaaS business, how synthetic biology works. In fact, when you see me interviewing entrepreneurs on This Week in Startups, a big part of it is I'm interviewing them and getting feedback from them on my own lack of knowledge in their space. So for you, if you're in Chinese medicine, which is obviously something that is, I wouldn't say it's an emerging field. Obviously, it's an ancient field, but it's for people here in the West, it's definitely going to be an emerging trend, and they're going to have to get their heads around it. And because it's considered not studied very well, and not based on double-blind studies in large part, it's going to be a challenge for you. In fact, I would say probably things like herbal medicine or alternative medicine have not traditionally been investments that a VC, a professional VC, would ever do. So I think you're going to probably face an uphill battle. It may not be that the VCs you're meeting with, the investors you're meeting with, the angels, don't get Chinese medicine. It might be that they don't buy into it. And I suspect it's the latter. When you're coming out with something that's alternative medicine, when they think that there might not be scientific proof or proven efficacy yet, they're going to be not interested, frankly, bluntly. If they think there's any chance of quackery or things that are made up that could open up to lawsuits, that's going to be a big problem. Now, of course, you see something like Lumosity, which is like brain training. And I think they got some sort of a fine. I'll look it up later, but there was some sort of fine because maybe they were making claims that were a little too aggressive. So I have seen investors in companies like Lumosity, which are doing marketing, saying, hey, this brain training is going to like make your brain better. And so people can be a little bit, they can exaggerate a little bit, at least according to the people who are leveling the fines against them. So I'm not saying VCs are not willing to invest in a space that's, let's say, not perfectly scientifically proven, but it's unlikely in my experience. So you may not have a problem of them not understanding traditional Chinese medicine. They may not buy into it. Okay, let's take another question. This one is from Michael. In launching an MVP, is it better to focus on acquiring a large number of users or demonstrating a revenue stream? Great question. This is the best question so far. Absolutely, Mike. Let me just rephrase that question, which is, when you're launching your startup, should you focus on acquiring users or getting revenue in the door? Just such a good question. In 2016, I think you want to have both switches flipped on. In other words, be like Uber or Thumbtack, where they're making a portion of the transaction every month and they have monetization on. I have one marketplace that I'm working with. They don't have monetization on, they have good growth, but people don't take it as seriously as another one I have where the growth is happening and the revenue is happening. And here's the thing. If it's never too early to get revenue, it's never too early to turn it on to find out if people are willing to pay for your product. So if you make a SaaS product, you don't charge for it, you don't know how much you could charge for it. And here's the other thing. If you're making a little bit of money, you can put it back into the product. It just makes everything more real. Now, I'm not saying for a photo sharing app, you're going to turn on monetization. And for an advertising, going out and selling ads when you have no inventory is pointless. But for things that are outside of consumer apps that are advertising based, I think turning on revenue early and figuring it out will get you more credibility with investors. And let's face it, we moved from the age of excellence a couple of years ago into the age of performance, when traction matters, and showing traction on revenue, even if it's small, is very meaningful. I see lots of investors looking at 100 transactions or 50 transactions in a product and discussing what the size of those transactions were. Did they have repeat transactions? So a little bit of revenue going through the system can lead to a really big discussion and make an investor more confident in giving you more money to pursue your vision. Also, you can, if you're making money, use that as a weapon in marketing and hiring against your competitors. So if you have revenue coming in the door and you're not burning a ton of capital, you can reinvest. So your competitor might be growing faster than you and you're growing half as fast in the short term, but you're making a ton of money, and then all of a sudden you just go rocket shipping past them because you can hire sales executives, you can hire a marketing company, you can do advertising because you have a revenue stream. You figured out the flywheel. Figuring out the flywheel is what it's all about in 2016, Michael, and I highly recommend you figure out both early. Okay, Carla asks, where are the opportunities to innovate with government? My answer very simply is the government is incredibly inefficient. There is no opportunity to make it more efficient. Our system is broken. You should give up. I kid. I think really, if you want to impact government, it's going to be largely from the outside. You do have people who are going to work, like Megan Smith from Google, who was part of the Obama administration. There are people inside there helping. So I'm not a cynic to say like you can't do anything, but I do think that there are tools which work better outside of government. Looking to make government more efficient might not be as efficient as looking at your life and saying, what things can we take away from the government and privatize, right? What can we do outside of the government in order to make our own communities work better? And then there's some things that are sort of hybrid. So, if you're building an app that, lets citizens take pictures of potholes and then report them to the, highway authorities to fix them, that's a great tool, and it can put pressure on them to eventually create their own tool to do it themselves and open up their own 411 system for giving information back to the city and that kind of stuff. So I always like the systems that are outside of it, but that have an impact on it internally, right? And that's usually information and sharing and people talking about stuff. But good question. I do think it's like slow and painful. So be careful if you're going to try to do it inside the government. I like to do it right around the government, kind of poking the tiger and moving them, sometimes shaming them, sometimes creating pressure on those elected officials, and sometimes giving them tools. That counts too. Okay, another question, this one from Maxwell. What are some processes you've put in place in your business that have been surprisingly valuable? Very good. The number one thing I think is product release cycles and having a deadline for releasing a product. Well, how do you create a deadline when you're the CEO, you're the founder, and there is no deadline? Well, you can manufacture a deadline. Potential deadlines include, we have a board meeting every 2 months, and I want to show the board our progress. And everybody in the company knows the board deck is being written in week 6. The board deck is going to be sent in week 7, which means you have to have performance in weeks 1 through 6. Or we're going to do a live demo of our new product to our 1,000 clients on March 1st. And then we're going to do another live demo on May 1st and another one on August 1st and another one on October 1st. So we're going to do a new release of new product. We're going to do a blog post, a webcast, and we're going to show everybody, do a press release and a press tour for every other one. And you get on that product release cadence. That cadence is critical because those deadlines make people increase performance. So I think that's the processes that you want to add, which is getting product out the door on some regular basis with everybody in the organization knowing, hey, these are the deadlines to get it done. Now, some companies have natural deadlines. So we have the launch festival. We have a countdown clock on the website. Hey, there's this many days, 50 days until the launch festival. You know what? That's as much for us internally as it is for the people in the public. We open the website, we go, oh my God, we got to get this stuff done. It's 50 days left. The clock is ticking. So I think that there are all kinds of different ways. The one I like is the product release cycle. Focus on that. Everything will work itself out. Because if you don't have new product, it's going to be super embarrassing and the company's going to tank. If you do have great new product, you're going to have more customers and things are going to go well. In fact, I think the biggest problem with Yahoo is they didn't release any products for like 2 years. When Marissa first took over, she was releasing a ton of new products. They had Yahoo Screen, they had Yahoo Weather, they had this Yahoo News Digest, they signed Katie Couric, they signed David Pogue. I don't think those were particularly great signings, honestly. I don't think those people are the types of talent that Yahoo needed, but at least it was something. It got people talking, it got people interested. They went to check it out. Maybe I'll see what Katie Couric's doing. Maybe I'll see what David Pogue's doing. And then they didn't iterate on any of that. They didn't say, hey, we did okay with Katie Couric. We did okay with David Pogue. How could we do better? What's the next 2 personalities? Or we did really bad with community and lost $30 million. What's the next thing we're going to do that will make $30 million or break even, right? There was no iteration on the product cycle. That is why people lost faith internally and externally in Marissa, I believe, and in Yahoo. And it's been a complete and utter disaster in the second half of her tenure. Good question, Maxwell. Listen, I could talk to you all day about Squarespace. I love this product. All of our sites are built on Squarespace. Why? Because I can just say, hey, Bryce, hey, Ashley, hey, Jackie, just change this on the Squarespace site. Hey, can we get this up on the Launch Festival site? Hey, can we get this up on the Launch Mobile site? Hey, on the Scale Conference, on this, on that. It instantly gets done. It's easy to use. Squarespace makes beautiful websites so simply. They have all these great design templates. You pick one, and all of a sudden, it looks like you spent $250,000 on your website. Literally, these designers are, a lot of designers are very upset. A lot of web shops are very upset about Squarespace. I've seen this many times where they would normally spend, people would spend $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 on a website, and Squarespace does it for $1 a month, like $10 a month. It's unbelievably affordable. And everything, it starts at $8 a month, by the way. Everything is responsive. So when you pull it up on your iPad or your phone, you have to pinch and zoom to see the website. It all just works. And you're not at, bent over a barrel by all these crazy developer freelancers who then disappear for months. They go, on a hike and they go bike across the United States while your website still isn't responsive or still isn't working. You need to have a professional group behind your website, and that is Squarespace. They also support e-commerce now, and they just keep adding features. Like they have a calendar feature that's really good right now, and there's all these little plugins and little, craftsmanship that make the site look so good. I love the product. You can start your free trial today with no credit card required, and when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, please use the offer code TWiST to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Build it beautiful. Please. It's a lot of ugly stuff going on in the world. A lot of ugly websites. Just use Squarespace and make the world beautiful. That's not their tagline, But I love beautiful websites. When I see a beautiful website for a conference, I buy a ticket. When I see a beautiful website for a product, I buy the product. When I see a beautiful website for a service or a startup, I want to meet with them. Go to squarespace.com and have a great, beautiful website. It's trusted by millions of people, including some of the most respected brands of the world. Their technology is state-of-the-art, secure, easy to use, scalable. You don't need to have a developer do it. I could talk for days. Thank you, Squarespace, for being one of my longest-running sponsors for This Week in Startups. I truly appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Okay, let's get back to the program. Welcome back to an all Ask Jason episode of This Week in Startups, and we were flooded with great questions. I love answering these questions because they make me think about my own investments, my own companies, my own businesses, and just it really gets you debating important topics. Gana asks, we have a prototype and going to be in beta in about 2 or 3 weeks. What are the top 5 things I should consider as I'm looking for funding and pitching to investors? Great question. In 2016, and you're asking for the top 5 things, so that's a very specific. Off the top of my head, you're going to want to have a prototype and a product that's clean and simple. Sometimes people come in and they think that having 7 features will impress people. The really savvy investors understand that most products that scale, become big in the world, they have 1 or 2 really simple, elegant features. Instagram, you upload a video, you comment, or upload an image and you comment. Then they added video to Instagram a couple years later, after many people were, asking for it. In other words, they didn't have like a really bad video feature. They didn't have messaging in the first version of Instagram. You uploaded a picture and you picked a filter. And they didn't have that many filters. And they kept, increasing the number of filters. So less is more. So have a beautifully designed product is number 1. Number 2, if you can have traction and understand your key metrics, the key performance metrics of your business, this is going to be super, super important. So if you come in and you've got some fakaka, crazy metric that you think is important, like the number of swipes, or the number of hearts, that might be something that a VC or an investor looks at and says, you didn't pick something important like the number of unique users every day or the number of minutes spent in the app. It could be that swipes are the most important thing in Tinder, who knows? But it might be that actual matches and people starting a conversation in Tinder are more important, or the percentage of conversations started to matches, right? Or the number of matches. And I think understanding your own metrics and just having, this will be my third, having a robust understanding and infrastructure around the metrics of your business, which is to say, if you come in and you've got Google Analytics or Chartbeat or Intercom or Mixpanel, there's a ton of these different services out there that, will manage all of the metrics of your business. And they're usually super cheap for startups. You can look and see they have startup pricing. But if you have these things lined up and you can look at different cohorts who are using your product, the amount of traffic you have, so that when VCs ask you these important questions and investors ask you these important questions like how's traffic, you can give a robust answer. You can pull up a chart. If you can pull up a chart, oh my God, so much better. Number 4, why are you doing this? What exactly is your goal here? You want to have some large, big, goal involved in your startup. And the answer shouldn't be to make a lot of money. If you say to a VC, I'm doing this for the money, and if you say, you need to do this so you can make a lot of money, we all have the signaling, which is the people who come into the business for money quit very quickly. So you've basically immediately DQ'd yourself. You disqualified yourself by saying you're in it for the money. If you are in it for the money, shut up and don't tell anybody. And a lot of people want a lot of money. I understand. Money's power. Some people grow up poor. They see money as freedom. They see money as something that will help. I don't disagree. Your life does get better at a certain point if you have a certain amount of money. It's obvious. Well, the studies have shown that. But that doesn't mean great businesses are built by people who are driven by money. In fact, it's the opposite in startups, because startups are so painful, and the mortality rate, my God, is so high. Like, most of them die. Most people don't make any money. Most people lose years of their lives and tons of hair and get tons of anxiety from them. That we know that if you're in for the money, it's going to be a problem. So you want to have some big, audacious goal and motivation. This whole start with why, or the purpose-driven culture. That kind of stuff. It sounds like it's kind of like soft. but it actually is kind of meaningful. So if I tell you, hey, listen, I do This Week in Startups because I love interviewing people, and I love helping entrepreneurs, and I love entrepreneurship, and I love startups. And it happens to do $1 million a year in revenue, and it happens to get 100,000 people watch every episode, and it's the millions of people have watched it. Okay, I didn't start with $1 million in revenue. It was embedded in a whole bunch of other stuff, and the other stuff included that I actually love doing this show every day, or twice a week. I wish I could do it every day. I would do it every day, actually. I love doing the show. I love getting your feedback on it. I love getting a high five. So that purpose, that'd be in my number 4, and I'm not giving these in ranked order. And number 5, why now? Why is this business going to work now as opposed to other times when people tried it? It could be because mobile phones exist. It could be because of GPS. It could be because of battery life. It could be because of solar cells have become so cheap. Who knows? There's some reason why this opportunity will work at this moment in time and not in the past, because there's tons of entrepreneurs out there who have been trying things for a long time. So why now? It could be broadband, it could be screen resolution, but I would look for the why now in your business at every chance you get. I hope that is helpful to you. Another good thing to do, have some advisors. That'd be number 6. Maybe go to a great incubator and have some investment from a kick-ass entrepreneur turned angel investor. Wink. Ding. Okay, let's take another couple questions here. Igor says, would you hire someone with a felony conviction given that he or she is an AA minus B plus team player worker? That's a great question. In fact, I did hire a felon, and I wrote a piece about it on calacanis.com, why I hired a felon. In fairness, I didn't know the person was a felon when I hired them, and so it was a little bit of a trick headline. But I had hired somebody who was a felon and was under conviction, was being convicted of a felony of doing cybercrime, and I didn't know it. I wouldn't have hired him, actually, if I had known. So I'm a bit of a hypocrite. If you have a venture-backed company and you were to have somebody involved on a technical basis because of, let's say, cybercrime, and then you have investors in your company and you hire this person, you're taking on a huge risk. So you have to look at the type of crime, I think. It would be very easy for me to sit here and say, like, oh yes, society has to forgive everybody. But in a startup company, you have a lot of issues to deal with. If you have somebody who was a felon convicted of murder, and you're doing some heinous, incredible crime, and you're doing something where they're interfacing with the public, my God, when that comes out, it could freeze any investment you have. People will question your judgment. In reality, if you hire people who are cyber criminals and did something really bad, like stole money from people, and then you're in payments, you're gonna have a pretty good story about why you hired somebody who stole money from people to work at PayPal. Now, it might be it's 10 years have passed, the person's reformed, we have them contained, and they happen to be brilliant. But boy, it is very easy for me to sit here and say, yes, you should go hire anybody and be completely agnostic to their past. That's not realistic. It could actually sink your startup. And so you have to go in eyes wide open and I think really evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. This is, I know, having gone through it, that when I had John work for me, was his name, it's all very public, it was very hard for me because I had to then go to bat and had to explain why my CTO didn't Google the person's name and find the story about him being under indictment for slaving, a couple of thousand computers. And in fact, when I found out, I realized, and I talked to the person, that they were just a misguided kid who, got caught up in some bad stuff online, didn't really steal anything, regretted it, had learned his lesson. And I actually wrote a note to the judge and said, hey, I really think this person was misguided. They have tremendous talent and they should go directly. When they get out, I would hire them again for another startup. But that was because I knew the person and I had a pretty good sense that, having spent enough time with that individual, that they were reformed. And in fact, they probably were never a bad person to begin with. The justice system is not always perfect. We've seen this over and over again. So, if we have a suspect justice system, you have to take that into account as well. Very, very complicated. And we have the Last Mile was on the show, and we met people from Last Mile who were convicted of armed robbery or other things, and now we're managing, co-working spaces. As a society, we have to let people pay for their crimes, and then we have to let them come back into, the workforce and into society. But at a startup company, you have investors, you have outside forces. It's not like you own the business outright. You have people to answer to. So the realistic answer is you better do a lot of due diligence and have a lot of discussions with your investors and a lot of controls in place in case something goes awry. In other words, if it was a technical person, do they have access to people's credit cards? Do they have access to the database of people's names? Could this lead to something horrific, right? I think a lot of people would answer this question like, big liberal answer like, everything's cool. It's not going to be cool for your investors on a very realistic basis. Your investors will be like, hey, I gave you money and now you're risking it. And is it necessary? And they do have a point. Is it necessary to take on this risk? Are there other places that can handle the risk better? And there might be places other than startups that could. Very complicated question. You have to do a ton of due diligence, and you have to answer it for yourself, looking in the eyes of the person and trying to make a judgment call like I did on, can your company afford this risk? I felt my company could afford the risk of having a felon work for us. I didn't fire him the second I found out. I let him continue to work. We put controls in place. But was not an easy decision for me. And I don't think it's going to be an easy decision for anybody. Do your due diligence and really think it through and talk to everybody, including your investors and board, about what you're thinking. Phoebe asks, how do consulting service providers scale up? The answer to that question is they don't. Service businesses do not scale. That is why VCs don't invest in them. Here's what happens in a service business. You have how much you can charge somebody. That's your client, right? So if you're charging people to build websites or doing design, you're an ad agency, whatever it is, you can keep raising your prices. And then there's how much do you pay for your staff, for your team, for your talent. Your profit is that little area between those two lines on the graph. Top line, how much should you charge? Bottom line, how much do you spend on your talent? Your talent constantly wants to be getting paid more. Surprise. The more talented they are, the more they want to get paid. The more they want raises. The harder they work, the more money they want. Surprise. Customers want you to give them a discount. Oh, you've been a loyal customer for 2 years. Can we get a discount on last year's price? Your life becomes miserable really fast in these service-based businesses. And that's why people don't invest in them. You cannot make them grow to scale unless you're a partnership. And generally they tend to be partnerships like law firms or accounting firms. They tend to be LLCs because all the partners basically work their butts off. They chop up the money. They each make $1 million a year at a law firm, or $2 million a year, or $500,000 a year, whatever it is. And they're all incented to control costs. And it's a great lifestyle. They make, 2 or 3 times what everybody else makes, but they don't have this outside investor and the chance of selling the company. So consulting is a great piece to add to an existing business. It could be part of your revenue mix, let's say, if you were creating software as a service, but it gets discounted heavily by investors in the public stock market. Wade asks, I'm assuming this is Dwayne Wade of the Miami Heat, which do you think will have a bigger impact on the VC market? AngelList's $400 million fund or YC's continuity fund? Okay, I don't think either of these are going to have a dramatic impact on the VC market because they're small compared to the large size of the overall VC market. And the number of startups have greatly increased, and the number of startups that need continuing funding has increased so massively that we still don't have enough funds. The $400 million in the AngelList fund, that is going to be dispersed, I think, at 100, 200, 300,000 per investment. So that could be upwards of 1,000 investments or something like that. 500 investments, we'll see. Maybe 2,000 in terms of them doling it out. And so over the next 3 years, maybe they do 300, 400, 500 investments a year of $200,000 or $300,000. It's not going to change things dramatically. It will be a very nice thing because startup companies will get a couple of extra months of runway. So if you burn $50K a month or $100K a month, I think the AngelList fund is going to add to the syndicates like mine, and I've met with the team over there who's doing this $400 million fund. I met with them before the holidays. And I told them, like, well, let's talk about what this relationship is. I think for my startups, instead of raising 300, they might raise 500. Hey, guess what? That 200K equals 4 more months of runway, 3 more months of runway, 6 more months of runway, 8 more months of runway. In other words, it's not going to change everything, but it's sure going to be nice. It could be a nice icing on the cake. Basically you get more traction, you have more time to figure it out before you go to the actual VCs. YC's Continuity Fund, again, it's just like another VC firm joining the market. It has created a lot of conflict of interest, and a lot of VCs have the daggers out for Y Combinator right now. That's why you hear a lot of people kind of, they're, and sometimes it's jealousy of YC, sometimes people feel threatened, but it adds to this narrative, which I don't think is a true narrative, it's kind of a false narrative, that YC is competitive with everybody, or YC is a circle the wagon kind of mentality, and now they're going to fund their own companies and box out other VCs. I don't think they're going to box out any other VCs. I think this is for them to go pro rata. So let's say they hit another Dropbox or they hit another Airbnb. I don't think they've had the ability, because those companies became so big, to keep doing their pro rata. So this is just for them to stay involved with the big companies coming out of their incubator, and they're doing 200, 300 companies a year or something like that, maybe 300. So they're going to need those companies, if they hit 2 unicorns a year, let's say they hit 1 unicorn a year. Probably 1 unicorn a year is probably a good average, 1 out of 300. Well, you know what? They're going to need $100 million for every unicorn they hit, 50 million, 100 million to keep going. But that doesn't box out everybody. Airbnb's raised a lot more than 50 million, and Dropbox has raised a lot more than $50 million. So I do think Zenefits raised a lot more. So I think these are nice developments, but they're not earth-shattering. They're just really awesome. Okay, Sheldon asks, does scaling and growing matter more than technology? Well, the answer is, if you had a ton of great technology and no growth and scale, VCs would not be interested in investing. And if you had a ton of growth and scaling and the technology was a disaster and you were putting Band-Aids on it, VCs would be very interested in investing. In fact, if your technology is collapsing under the stress of your growth, that is one of the reasons to raise venture capital, is to have your infrastructure catch up. So I think a lot of people get a little bit snooty and, highfalutin about, oh, we have to have this great technology. Oh my God, everything's got to be perfect. You know what? Great technology, no growth, no money. No employees. Nobody wants to be involved in your business. Great growth and the technology is a disaster. You know what? And you're playing catch up. Everybody wants to be involved. In fact, I was a Zenefits customer in the early days, and let me tell you something. I'm an investor in the company now, a small investor, and my friend David Sachs works over there, and he's a big investor. He's on the board. And I told him, I was like, wow, this is a little bit rough. Let's put it that way. They've solved all these problems. But 6 months ago, he was like, hey, how do you like the service? I was like, it's rough. Like a lot of things are not finished and it kind of is a little ganky and broken. There's no, the product's not well designed. And he was like, fair enough, we're working on it. And now it's 6 months later, they raised a ton of money at a huge valuation, tons of growth. They're a unicorn. And you know what? The product's awesome now. So again, you can fake it till you make it. You can have, a lot of little bumps and bruises and acne and awkwardness as a youth, as long as you have growth and you grow up and you can clean all that stuff up. So the answer is definitively growth over technology. Hendrik asks a great question. What are the big video trends that are going to shake up the market, and how do we best take advantage of them? I love this question. Video is so huge, so huge. As you know, human beings watched no video until 100 years ago, and then all of a sudden we started watching 3, 4, 5 hours a day here in the United States. This is not normal. Our brains have been rewired to watch tons of television, watch tons of movies, watch now YouTube and Vines and Snapchats. It's pretty amazing. And as broadband has become ubiquitous in our pockets, not just at our homes, video is just working. The resolution of cameras is truly scary. The phone in your pocket can shoot 4K, which is a broadcast level above what our TVs can show. Think about that for a moment. In your pocket is a camera, if you have the new iPhone, that shoots 4K, or a new Samsung's, and your television at home and the broadcast cable networks and DirecTV and a lot of these can't even show the 4K yet. That is mind-blowing. I know some of them have 4K, but largely they're not actually showing 4K video on cable channels. So it is a super renaissance. Where are the opportunities? Well, business-to-business video is going to be huge. This is a business-to-business video, right? Where you're watching something in a vertical, and this show has become $1 million a year show. And let's face it, we're not doing this as a business. We do this as a hobby, and it's become $1 million a year business. If we made it a business like Leo Laporte has with Twit, it could be, I think his business does $6, $7, $8 million a year. So podcasts are going to be huge. And now podcasts and apps coming to Apple TV and people having internet built into their TVs and cord cutting and looking for new content sources, huge. Obviously, people are building television shows now, directly taking them to Netflix. So on the high end, you have that. In the medium area, you have podcasting, which is where we live. And then in the small area, you have DJ Khaled. DJ Khaled, yeah. He, I wrote a piece about him on Snapchat getting 3 million views per snap. Well, Kim Kardashian, who just signed a $100 million, I think, 4-year deal, or 3 or 4 year deal, she had like 1.5, 2 million people watching her network show. So, this obscure DJ who's making funny 6-7 second videos all day long is now getting the viewership of Kim Kardashian. He is not getting the revenue yet, but I do think that Snapchat shows you the future of reality television, which is people taking out their phone, recording moments, and sharing them, and lo and behold, millions of people watching. And if it's millions now, it'll be tens of millions. And if it's tens of millions, eventually it could become hundreds of millions, just like Gangnam Style in a music video broke 1 billion views. And now there's a whole collection of videos that have broken 1 billion views on YouTube. So user-generated video, semi-professional, short mobile video, it's all going to be extraordinary. And I think it's going to become an era where individuals are able to produce content that is just incredibly compelling to some group of people, whether it's 1,000 true fans or 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million, and actually make a living doing it. I literally could stop everything I'm doing and just do a podcast every day and make a living. It's kind of mind-blowing to me. That would be something that just 10, 20 years ago did not exist in the world. The infrastructure didn't exist. The advertisers didn't buy in. And now, Adam Carolla, Leo Laporte, Tom Merritt with his Daily Tech News show. I mean, it is amazing. People on Patreon and Recurrency making, hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. Not a lot of people, but they're out there. And I think video is going to be just an incredible opportunity. In fact, if I was running Yahoo, I'm not running Yahoo. I'm not saying that, someday I might not run Yahoo. Who knows? Somebody might ask me. If I was running Yahoo, I wouldn't have done this mobile, social, video, ad network, and services. Like Marissa picked 18 things to work on. Well, realistically, probably 7 or 8. She should have just gone all video in my mind and made it a content company like Terry Semel had thought. And I think they would have been so brilliantly positioned if they cut 2/3 of the staff and then hired 1,000 video performers to just make video all day and put ads in front of them. So video is huge. And individuals making it, and then individuals becoming semi-pro, semi-pros becoming pros, pros coming down to semi-pro. I think is going to be a big trend where you see like Joe Rogan has his podcast now and he's clearly become passionate about it. I don't think Joe Rogan or Adam Carolla want to do regular TV. I think they like the freedom and the control they get by doing semi-pro. They still make millions of dollars. They may not make tens of millions. They may not reach as many people, but they control the authenticity of everything they do, which is huge. Okay, final question here. This is Sean's question. Sean says, your thoughts regarding how to raise capital for startups that have innovative new technology that requires multidisciplinary technical teams to bring it to market. All right, what you're basically saying there is you're going to need a lot of money to get this thing to market. Well, you know what? There are investors who like to invest in that, and they take a multi-year approach. You're going to need to have a lot of research done, and you're going to need to go to the best and the brightest, VCs out there and skip the angel round. And the best way to do that is really you're going to have to build together a scientific team, get a core group of people, 3, 4, 5 scientists, to say, hey, we're going to commit to this on this date if we raise this amount of funding. So I had this happen with a company that was doing a 3D printer. I can't say the exact details, but let's just say this is a pretty far out there type of 3D printer. And they said, hey, we have this talent lined up. They are at these universities. They have this, level of compensation. We need this amount of money, this amount of time. Are you willing to invest? I said, yeah, put me down for 100. It's 100 dimes, $100,000. And here are other investors who would do that. And I think they wound up raising close to $10 million, and it gives them 2 or 3 years to 2 years to get to market, maybe a year and a half. The stuff is not like building, a photo sharing app and having it out in a weekend. This is a 3D printer that's going to do some crazy, crazy stuff. It's going to take 2 years in the lab to have a commercial product ready. And let me tell you, when that commercial product's ready, it's going to be similar or akin to the Tesla Roadster, which is to say, it's going to be expensive and not for everybody. I mean, Tesla sold 2,000 or 3,000. I think it was 2,300 was the number of Roadsters that were eventually sold for $120,000 each. And these things were carbon fiber, absurdly fast go-karts that, fit 2 people and no luggage or very little, like a day bag. It was not, and they weren't the most comfortable. I own one. Then the Model S comes out, the Model X comes out. I mean, these are cars that you could drive for 10 hours and are delightful. And that's just, but that took 10 years. It's a 10-year journey for Elon Musk. He had to put 50 million, 100 million into that company to just get the prototype out the door. So you need to have sophisticated investors, and you have to have a plan, and you have to have a very sophisticated, talented team to build up your credibility. But it sounds like you're on the way. You have to just basically admit you're not going to do an angel round and go right to, we're going to do a VC round, which means you got to line up all your talent ahead of time, have them on contingency ready to go. It's a lot more upfront work. It's sort of like making a major feature film versus making a short, right? Or making a podcast, right? You're talking about making a major feature film. You better have a damn good script. And you better be on revision number 3 or 4 of that script. And you better have your actors all attached. And you better have your director attached. And now you're just looking for the funding, right? Everything is lined up. Even the foreign sales is lined up, to use a metaphor, of like, when you're doing a big movie, like, you got to have your ducks in a row. You're not making like a little indie, handheld camera jam. You got to have serious work done ahead of time. All right, listen. Lots of great questions. And hey, if you want to learn more, obviously watch thisweekinstartups.com. Write a blog post. We love when you guys and gals out there write blog posts about what you learned from the show. We always retweet them. So if you write a blog post, you're almost guaranteed that we will retweet your Medium post or your Blogger post, your WordPress post, your Squarespace post, wherever you put your posts, if it's good. You can put a little bit of work into it. But if you write that, make sure you just CC at TWI Startups on Twitter. We'll see it and we'll probably retweet it. And hey, the best place to learn about startups and to get inspired, Launch Festival. Go to launchfestival.com. 15,000 people will be there this year, and we're going to give 10,000 people free tickets. It's coming in 50 days, and you are going to love this event. 3 stages, tons to learn, 50 new companies launching, 225 companies in the demo pit. It's going to be an unprecedented scale of an event, including the scale stage, where you have a bunch of speakers who talk just about how to grow your business. Something for everybody in the startup space there. Launchfestival.com. Go ahead and get a free ticket, or if you want to buy a ticket that gets you into the dinner, so you can just click the tickets page. It's a bunch of tickets from $300, $500, and $3,000 for the super VIP experience. Go ahead and join us at the Launch Festival, and if you see me, give me a high five or a fist bump, and I hope to see you there. Okay, bye-bye.